Good afternoon. My name is Akia S. Collum, she, her pronouns, and I proudly serve as a member of the Board of Directors of the ACLU of Connecticut. Welcome to the Building Power 2022 Legislative Wrap-Up. We know that policy and advocacy go hand in hand, and now that the 2022 legislative session has come to a close, this is a prime opportunity to reflect on the past to jumpstart our future. Before I turn it over to our phenomenal panelists, happy belated birthday to the Smart Justice team who turned 4 on June 9th. Bigger than bills is the fact that Smart Justice was at the Capitol every single day of session, fighting to make legislators listen to justice-impacted people. That solidarity is our impact. Every time legislators voted about whether to invest in people instead of prisons and policing, Smart Justice was in the hallway asking them to truly see and listen to the people that they could choose to help instead of harm. We must be strategic and measured as we continue to dismantle these systems of oppression. The ACLU of Connecticut is ready to keep fighting for a future where our communities are safe, healthy, and free. How we truly become the land of the free depends largely on what happens next. We are glad to be joined here today by 4 of our ACLU team members with unique stories who can help us reimagine our realities and shape our future. Panelists, please introduce yourself with your name, pronouns, title, and how long you have been with the ACLU.
Hi folks, my name is Claudine Constant. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Public Policy and Advocacy Director here at the ACLU, and I have been with the organization coming up on 3 years in August.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anderson Curtis. I'm the Senior Policy Organizer here at the American Civil Liberties Union of Connecticut, and I have had the pleasure and the privilege of working here for the past 4 years, and boy, has it flown by.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Gus Marks Hamilton, he, him, his. I'm the campaign manager with the ACLU of Connecticut Smart Justice Campaign, and I've been with the ACLU of Connecticut since 2018.
Hey everyone, I'm Jess Zaccanino. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Policy Council of the ACLU, and I've been here since this past September.
Thank you once again for joining us. Just some housekeeping. Please note that closed captioning is available. To activate, simply select closed captioning closed caption found at the bottom of your screen. And a special thank you to our ASL interpreter. If anyone has a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A button located on the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer your questions during the Q&A portion of the conversation. If we cannot get to your question, we will be sharing our contact information at the end of the discussion. So let's jump right in. Gus, can you fill us in on one of the wins, or some of the wins rather, Smart Justice fought hard to receive this year?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. The big win was that we were back in the building. We spent all of 2021, even some of 2020, advocating outside of the building because the Capitol had been closed down due to the pandemic. So the Smart Justice leaders, the PPAD staff, we were finally able to be back in the building, not the entire building, but the first and second floor of the Capitol to be able to talk to legislators. And this year we had 3 legislative priorities, and the one that we finally got over the finish line was a legacy issue that Smart Justice has been working on going all the way back to 2019, when the Council on the Collateral Consequences of a Criminal Record was first established. So this year, we introduced in the Labor Committee, we didn't introduce, but we supported an issue looking at occupational licensures for people who are living with a criminal record. Got out of the Labor Committee, was passed by the House, and then on the final day of the session, it was passed by the Senate and signed into law by Governor Lamont just a couple of weeks ago. It is a bill that will create an individualized assessment for people who are living with a record, so that rather than simply denying people employment opportunities just outright, blanket bans on people who are living with a criminal record and searching for professional opportunities, it allows them to look at the amount of time that's passed since their conviction happened, the type of rehabilitation they have gone, whether it's schooling, programs, classes, like who are they right now in their lives as opposed to what happened in their past. And then also looks at the relationship between the type of employment the person's trying to get into and what their conviction was. So that is an issue that we've been working on at Smart Justice for for a number of years, impacts a number of the Smart Justice leaders who work in the campaign. And it's a bill that finally became law this year, and we're very proud of.
That's awesome. And I think you highlighting the fact that being back in the building, I don't know about you all, but seeing People's Not Prison, blue t-shirts all over the LOB is definitely something to look forward to, especially going up to the Capitol. But knowing all the things that you all have been advocating for, we're truly thankful to have your leadership. So I appreciate that. Now, as Gus alluded to, solidarity and being present at the Capitol plays an important role in our impact. We also know that legislators are voted by the people to represent them adequately. Anderson, can you explain the ways that the ACLU of Connecticut works with legislators in the building and the importance of fostering these relationships?
Certainly. You know, as I said, I've been here at the ACLU 4 years, and you know, the engagement and the lobbying with the legislators has grown as the campaign has grown. You know, in the beginning, it was a few of us, you know, but as our campaign has grown and we have more leaders coming to the Capitol, more supporters coming to the Capitol, you know, my role has changed. So now as senior policy organizer, instead of initiating some of the discussions, for me now it looks like, you know, I identify some of the legislators and bring a few other people with me and like create a space for those with me to engage with the legislators. It's almost like I give an introduction and a handoff, right? But I don't step away. What we found is very important with Claudine, myself, and Gus, and Jess is we stay there and support them in that moment, right? Because there's a big difference in being present and listening and actively supporting than just stepping away and walking away, right? Because we're very big on creating a space for our people, but more important than that, making sure they're comfortable in that space and protected in that space. And the legislators also appreciate it because, you know, they are starting to come to us for information and questions on our policies, right? And things they may want to know. So the engagement has been, has grown, and, you know, it's very exciting to see not just new people, but new leaders emerging, right? And because of the spaces we create. And that's just really exciting in my role. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Anderson. It seems like you all have been able to leverage relational capital to help propel things forward, and recognizing that their stakeholders at the LOB is important, right? Like I said before, we have been able to elect folks and hold them accountable, and you all are fighting day in and day out. Oftentimes not leaving until 2 o'clock in the morning, gotta see your post. Making sure that you're fighting on behalf of the folks and holding our legislators accountable to what they actually set out to doing. So thank you so much, Anderson, for highlighting that. But similarly, there's power in partnerships, right? And how building power takes community. What does partnerships with ACLU and other organizations look like? So I'm going to turn this over to Claudine, and Anderson, you can chime in afterwards as well.
Thanks, Akia. So while we are a policy forward department, the heartbeat and the root of the work that we do is actually from organizing. And good organizing requires intentional relationship building, not only with people in power, but community members, folks who are supposed to hold people in power accountable to the work that they said that they would do, right? And in order for us to have good policy pass through that building and support good policy passing through that building, that requires intentional connections, intentional relationship buildings, and just seeing other organizations and other community members that maybe aren't in the natural purview of the work that we do. I think people often forget that the ACLU doesn't only work on criminal legal system issues. However, we have found that the criminal legal system issues are kind of like the root of a lot of the foundational breakdowns in our society, right? But we're a 16 issue area organization, which means we also focus on a lot of other different things, including reproductive justice rights, voting rights, immigration rights, health care rights and healthcare access for all of those different things. If we want to see true divestment from oppressive systems in our community, it requires us to stop functioning in silos and start looking at each other as pipelines, right? And so in order for us to truly divest from painful, oppressive systems, it requires us connecting with organizations that aren't maybe a criminal legal system forward organizations. Meanwhile, we still do love and show up and support and show out for some of our community partners like Stop Solitary Connecticut and the CTS, the Connecticut Justice Alliance and different folks like that. But really intentionally, it also means us showing up for partners like Planned Parenthood Connecticut or Pro-Choice Connecticut or Health Equity Solutions or other organizations like that that are also trying to address the root oppressive systems that are happening in our society today. So recently and in the coming years, you will see Smart Justice and the ACLU being more present at events, rallies, press conferences, showing up on bills, testifying on bills that not only have to do with the harmful impacts of the criminal legal system, but also the harmful things that are happening to marginalized people all over the place. And that's kind of the space that we're trying to take up right now, is what does it mean to meaningfully show up and show out for community partners in a way that moves liberation forward.
I would just like to add on to that. You know, when Claudine talks about us being policy and organizing is the heartbeat, right? And relationships are the heartbeat of organizing. So as senior policy organizer this year, I was looking to focus on establishing some new relationships, cultivating some new relationships with legislators. And that included our bipartisan efforts talking to Republicans as we have never done before. And that we brought in other leaders, we brought in supporters. And, you know, one of the benefits of being back in the building and instinctively, everybody was happy to see each other. So we kind of capitalized on that and we reached out across the aisle, what you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, and just started talking to people. And because of our consistent presence on a daily basis, smiling with happy faces, just saying hello sometimes, not really getting into the policy part, but getting into the people part, letting them see us for who we are, that we're people, authentic, right? And just like them, there's a lot of intersection. So we had a lot of success with that and relationships going forward. And, you know, that's very exciting because quite frankly, we're going to need everyone in the state to come together for solutions that are going to work for all of Connecticut. And that's what we are. We are a call-in campaign. We invite people into the work. We educate them, bring awareness, and we invite them into the solutions. And I'm very grateful this year that we were able to establish some new relationships. And I look forward to sustaining those relationships in the coming session.
No, that's been extremely helpful. I think you all have leveraged 2 points that I want to reiterate. Being policy focused and you know, the heartbeat is through organizing and holding folks accountable. Like, that's definitely known, a known fact, especially in the organizing space, but also moving from systems change to systems transformation and utilizing the relationships that we have currently. I think sometimes we get stuck in these ideas of like just being in a change focused part, but it needs to be dismantled, right? Like, how do we now move into this transformation space and really reinvent what this might look like for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years, for the next 100 years, right? What does that look like? And how do you bring people along for that journey? But this is my favorite quote, so I'm going to mention it during this time period. In the words of Rihanna, so when we're marching and protesting and posting about the Michael Brown Jr.'s and Asiana Jeffersons of the world, tell your friends to pull up. Claudine, you're a perfect example of creating a tangible strategy for long-term change. Let's talk about the intersections of our legislative work and with partners and what is next.
Woo. Okay, so going along this lines of organizing being the heartbeat of good policy change, right? We're entering an electoral cycle. Elections are in November, and I think something that I noticed from being back in the building this year and being kind of in the trenches, so to speak, with other community partners is we're all having kind of this like aha moment of like, again, it's no longer sustainable for us to be scrapping and fighting for small pieces of a pie that, you know, a small few have control over. And what does it mean for us to meaningfully connect together to my pie analogy isn't working anymore, so I'm going to scrap it. But what does it mean for us to meaningfully connect together and start speaking the same language around liberation, around divestment, around what it means for Connecticut residents to meaningfully thrive in their communities, right? And that's kind of what Smart Justice has their eyes on. Smart Justice and the ACLU has their eyes on moving for the rest of the year, is what does it mean for us to meaningfully show up in this electoral cycle to not only pressure soon to be elected officials to commit to Connecticut residents thriving and all Connecticut residents, not just a small few, but what does it mean for us to center the issues that are actually important to residents, actually important to the people that are pulling up every day saying, we are dying out here, see us, feel us, support us, right? And so these are the things that we're kind of looking towards now. Not only around this work of divesting, because as you know, ACLU has been hammering hard the notion of divesting from police and all policing systems and investing in community residents. What does it actually mean to hold legislators accountable to that during the time that they're trying to look their best and be elected in November? So that's kind of what we're looking forward to for the rest of the year. And also, how does it pile up into 2023, right? The next legislative session is quickly approaching. And what we want to make sure is that the work that we invest ourselves in now builds up to something. So what we are saying now, how does that result in meaningful policy change in 2023? How are we, yes, we had that win around the occupational licensing bill, but we were also pushing a couple of other priority bills that address the front end of the criminal legal system as it relates to deceptive police interrogation practices and the scope, role, and power that prosecutors and state's attorneys have in Connecticut. What does it mean to hold people accountable to, reducing the size, scope, and power of state's attorneys and police in our state? How do we come back and have those wins in 2023? We can't do it alone. We need meaningful connection and meaningful partnerships with community partners, but also legislators that also understand and believe in liberation for everybody. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of what's coming down the pike for us.
You did. You absolutely did. And I think as we sift through, language is definitely something that I have uplifted and highlighted in many different spaces. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the jargon and utilizing academic language. A lot of us are in those academic spaces and, it doesn't mean anything. So how can we now break down the silos where people and communities that we're actually interfacing with actually have a stake and what we're actually co-developing with them, right? Like, this is not something that we're dictating to them. I always say that I am not a doctor, so I can't prescribe anything to anybody. I'd rather co-create things for people in tandem as opposed to making sure folks are on my agenda. I'd rather co-create the agenda with them as well. So I think you have highlighted and pinpointed several different things that we need to take into consideration, especially talking about sifting through the noise as we continue to think about the election as that's coming up. There's a lot of buzzwords that might come up, right? There's a lot of things about racial equity that might come up. There's a lot of things about talking about the criminal injustice system and how that shows up too. But there are ways that we could probably hold folks accountable by asking some simple questions. So that might be an opportunity for us to leverage and think about what a fact sheet or a checklist. I don't know, I'm put some work for y'all, but that might be the opportunity.
And I mean, if folks that are listening to this right now want to figure out how to participate in this work or kind of hear what's coming down the pike, make sure you're signed up for our action alerts. We are constantly sending out blasts to our membership to figure out how people can get involved in this work. And electoral work is one of the easiest ways to just get involved and say that you care in liberation for all.
I will never forget Anderson hitting me up on Facebook like, Kia, I need you to write this testimony for this bill. And I'm like traveling, coming back home from somewhere. I think I was coming back from Miami. I was like, Anderson, I don't know if I'm able to do this, but I did it, right? And I got it done. So think about, there's little ways that you all could help support. Like Claudine said, make sure you tune in to the ACLU of Connecticut because we have a lot of things coming down the pipeline to support you all as we move forward. Justice, actually your question, so I'm going to turn it over to you. The health of pregnant people has become a giant political football as far-right legislatures pass even more abortion ban. Let's bring it back. The health of pregnant people has become a giant political football. Thinking about how abortion bans have now sprung up in anticipation of the Supreme Court's Roe versus Wade ruling, how can we push for expanded abortion healthcare in Connecticut, as well as protections for gender-affirming healthcare as well?
Yeah, so this legislative session, Connecticut led the nation in passing the strongest legislation to protect access to abortion and gender-affirming care. First, House Bill 5414, or Public Act 2219, seeks to prevent Connecticut courts from cooperating with a lawsuit or prosecution regarding a lawful abortion that occurs in the state, while also protecting those in Connecticut from extradition charges in other states related to abortion. This bill also expands access by permitting certified APRNs and physician's assistants under the supervision of a physician with the ability to perform an abortion, thereby improving access to providers and also reducing patient wait times. Additionally, the legislature passed an amendment to the state budget, which bars compliance with out-of-state summons or warrants related to reproductive health care or gender-affirming healthcare services that are legal in Connecticut. If someone has a judgment issued against them based on statutes that criminalize abortion or gender-affirming health services in other states, this law would allow them to also sue the person that brought that initial suit against them for damages. And finally, the law also prohibits any health plan or healthcare provider from disclosing this protected information that's related to reproductive health care or gender-affirming care that's legal in Connecticut, unless the patient gives their written consent. So public agencies are similarly prohibited from spending time or money assisting in an interstate investigation seeking to impose criminal or civil liability on someone who provided or received an abortion or gender-affirming healthcare services. These two bills are critical in a time where nearly half of the states are poised to dramatically curtail abortion access, and many already have. And then dozens of states have also passed or considered bills that single out and target LGBTQ+ people, transgender people in particular, for unfair and unequal treatment and a lack of access to healthcare that they need. Yeah.
Now this is helpful. Basically, we're a safe haven, if I'm not like wrong, right? We have developed a safe haven here in Connecticut. And what's interesting, so I'm actually a professor at Post University in the sociology department, and this week happens to be about LGBTQ issues. So hearing about not only LGBTQ issues, but we spoke about abortion and abortion access, and a lot of my students were talking about, there's a level of fear around not being able to have access in their individual states, and like not knowing if they're going to be prosecuted if they go to another state like Connecticut or New York and go back home to wherever they are, whether it's a Texas, a Kentucky, and be prosecuted in their individual jurisdictions. Like, what does that look like? So being able to know that Connecticut has really created a safe haven for folks that are interested in coming here or going out or already here, that's a breath of fresh air. And I thank you all for helping to support that as folks are starting to sift through for individual reasons on why they do get abortions. Sometimes it is health issues, but sometimes you just seem they can't afford it. And sometimes you just don't want it. And it's none of our business, right? Like, we just need to figure out how we can continue to protect folks as we go through that. So without further ado, I'm actually going to do Q&A. We have about 5 minutes left for Q&A, and there's a few questions in the chat. So I'm going to try to speed through this and hopefully moderate and pinpoint questions to folks that it probably be wise to answer. Let's keep the answers to a minute or less so that we have access to actually do all the questions within the next 5 minutes. Sounds good? Yes, Claudia, I'm looking at you. All right, so the first question, are you working on any contingency plans in case we have a new governor and or a more conservative legislature after this fall election? I'm actually going to turn it over to Claudia.
I mean, part of the beauty of smart justice is that we show up as smart justice no matter where we are and who's in power. We are nonpartisan in nature, right? Which means we're going to talk to anybody and everybody. And so the plan of getting involved in electoral work is to make sure that everybody knows who we are, regardless of whether they're elected or not, right? So, we've heard multiple times that we are literally everywhere, and we plan to just keep that same energy. And so that's the plan for right now. We're not going to step back. We're not going to tone down, how progressive our bills are. We just know that relationship building just needs to continue happening. So we do know it will get harder if that is the case.
Thanks, Claudine. We have another question in the chat. So the established power structure seems to now peddle the line that we've gone too far on many of the issues that ACLU cares about, and that Connecticut should roll back progress. Is that what you're finding when you're chatting with actual real life people?
I'll quickly say yes and no, depending on the person, but there are, if you think about the demographic of people in power that show up in the Capitol, there are some folks that feel like we've done enough, right? Naming the police accountability bill in particular that passed in 2020, that I think all the folks on this call don't think went far enough, right? And we have seen grabs to roll back some of the good things that did pass in that bill. One thing I want to highlight from a super high policy level for Connecticut is that the political structure is changing regardless of who is sitting in that seat, which means folks that do the work that we do are entering a more defensive way of showing up to the work, which means not only are we trying to push progressive policies, we're also defending a lot more policies that are just common sense good for the people. And so I would say that there are some moderate Dems and definitely Republicans that think we have done enough, but we do have our pocket of progressive Democrats that are interested in pushing the ball as far as it'll go. So it's a yes and.
We always like a yes and. Things are always changing. So we have two more questions. Is there a way to stop, well, three now. Is there a way to stop Connecticut from making highways or roads by removing people who live in the way of those roads? I'm thinking about Remington Woods and Bridgeport.
So I'm not an expert on an eminent domain, although I know it is pretty difficult to prevent the government from doing this. Usually courts will rule in favor of the government, but yeah, so it's quite difficult.
No, thanks, Jess. And then another question is, what about early voting and changing the state constitution? We love these questions. This is my area. Go ahead.
Should I take it, y'all? Do y'all want to take it? You want me to take it? Oh. Okay, so that's one of the things that Smart Justice and our affiliate will actively be focusing on this legislative session, is that early voting is on the ballot. When you go to the polls in November, you will see a referendum question asking if we should grant the legislature powers to open up the Constitution to expand early voting access. I don't think that's the exact terminology, but that is what it will look like, right? Vote yes on that. Yes, we want that to happen. Early voting, Connecticut is one of 10 states in the whole United States that does not have early voting opportunities for its residents, and that is horrible. That connects to racial equity and racial justice issues for people who are day laborers or people who are working jobs that don't grant them time to be able to go and vote. It holds the status quo for people in power that are not interested in letting marginalized people thrive. So we want to vote yes on early voting, and Smart Justice will be out there door knocking in different, very targeted and specific communities to get people to figure out if they're interested in, if they know that early voting is on the ballot initiative, but also to educate folks on how critical it is to expand voting rights for everybody in Connecticut. So.
Wow, you're hot today, Claudine. That was a great
answer. I was like, dang. I'm like, okay, I'm trying. I mean, I do have a question for you all before I move to this next question. Can we please make sure that when we are highlighting the language part, I think the jargon once again gets kind of confusing and folks are just like, I don't know what this says. I'm gonna say no. So that we are also including that in our campaign, which I'm pretty sure y'all will. So I just want to highlight that. This is the last question. Since we are celebrating Pride Month, I know that Connecticut is one of the better states for LGBTQ issues, but are there any local threats that we need to be aware of?
I'll take this. I would say pay attention to, while we are a safe haven as it relates to repro rights and reproductive justice, I would pay attention to jargon and small things that either pass on a municipal level as it relates to healthcare centers, but also on a state level as it relates to the kind of care that can be provided to different kinds of people, right? And so I would pay attention to that. And also there is a conversation that's happening right now down in Greenwich around trans youth. And there are a couple of things, right? So we have taken on, there have been conversations around trans youth's accessibility to sports and participating in sports. There have been conversations around healthcare and, honoring people's gender identity and sexuality as they show up in spaces. But there's a specific conversation happening with the Board of Education in Greenwich around trans youth in general. I would pay attention to the incendiary language that is starting to seep in around access and opportunities for our LGBTQIA+ community members as they show up in spaces. So it's happening more on a local level than a statewide level, but as we all know, municipal and local things feed up into the state, which means we should not only be paying attention to what's happening around the state, but what's happening in your individual communities.
Wow, what a perfect ending. No, but to be honest with you all, thank you all for being here and sharing your knowledge on what we have been able to accomplish in 2022 legislative session, but what else we have to look forward to in 2023. I can't believe we're 6 months since 2022 already. The summertime is crazy. But I truly appreciate your commitment, not only to the organization, but also to our communities. I think I was mentioning earlier today, I align myself with people, but I also align myself with missions. If I'm not able to articulate the mission accordingly, I'm not going to be here in this space. So I truly appreciate you all allowing me to moderate this conversation with you all. For folks that are still here with us, to learn more about how to support any of the work you heard about today, please reach out to info@aclu-ct.org and we'll connect you with the appropriate staff person who will get back to you in a timely manner. A recording of today's conversation will soon be available on our Facebook and YouTube pages. And make sure you stay in touch with us at ACLU.org, ACLU-CT.org, my apologies, and connect with us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Well, thanks, y'all. I'll see you all later. Thank you all for tuning in during this lunchtime conversation.